Welcome back to the Champagne on Ice podcast presented by the Field of 68. After a week off, we are back with some Illini hoops talk, and it is a busy week, maybe the busiest week, maybe the most action-packed week that we'll see all season with this Illinois team. I'm Kyle Tausk, joined as always by Mike Farmer. Mike, how you doing? How was your break, sir?
Thanksgiving break went well. A little bit of Illinois action. Got the win yesterday over Rutgers. Awesome start to the Big Ten Conference season. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great, especially after watching that basketball game yesterday. Apologies for not releasing an episode last week, but there was hardly anything going on. Illinois played one game in 12 days, and it was against Western Illinois. It was also Thanksgiving weekend, so we're back now, and we got a loaded episode here today. Two games coming up this week, and also the Big Ten opener against Rutgers yesterday, which is where we will start, because it was a very impressive performance by this Illini team. 76-58 was the final at the Rack. That's what we'll always call it. I will not be calling it Jersey Mike's Arena. We are calling it the Rack for eternity. And the reason we are is because it's been notoriously a very hard place for teams to go in and win, and Illinois made it look really easy yesterday. It was just their second win in a Big Ten road opener since 2011, I think. So Big Ten road openers have not been kind to Illinois. Yesterday was not the case. Illinois was dominant pretty much throughout. Rutgers made a little bit of a run late in the first half, but the start of both halves, Illinois absolutely went off, was dominant. I think they started the game 18-4, held Rutgers to like 4 points in the first 8 minutes of the game, and then to start the second half after Rutgers had cut it to 5 at halftime, I believe they went on another like 20-5 run or something like that and really just took control of the game. So we'll start with that. Mike, what did you think of that performance? I am very impressed. It answered a lot of the concerns I had. I know it's just one game, but man, that if that team can play like that on both ends of the floor, I think they're going to be pretty dangerous.
Yeah, it is one game for sure. First game of the Big Ten season. I know it is early. I do think Rutgers is one of the a team in the lower tier of the Big Ten. I know they've
Sure.
got a decent amount of talent. They got a good coach. They'll win games at home this year, of course, at the Rack. I do think I think their talent has dropped off a bit. I don't think they'll do too much in the Big Ten. But regardless, huge win on the road. Great way to start the conference season. Great way to gain some momentum going into FAU, Tennessee, and Missouri in this non-conference schedule we keep talking about. I think you start with just all around dominance, pretty much. Hitting three-pointers. There were some turnover issues. I know Rutgers was doing that press for a little bit. It'll be interesting to see if other teams maybe implement the press because Illinois' lack of a point guard. Great on the glass. The fouls were. I'm not worried about the fouls in that game. I think the refs they were struggling yesterday, but defense phenomenal. Guys are making shots. Guys are hitting the rebounds. Just all around, really fun to watch. The team looked really good. I don't think there's too much more to say.
Yeah, I agree with you that I don't think this Rutgers team is particularly good, but I still think this is a really impressive win given the
Yeah.
environment that you're going into, the building you're going into. Illinois was 0-3 in their last three games there, and Rutgers, they've picked off so many good teams there because they just make it so ugly. I think this Rutgers team is still really good defensively. They came into the game number one in 2-point field goal defense, top 10 in the country in defensive efficiency. So I still think it's a good defensive team. And one, I came into the game kind of concerned, is this where we're really going to see, especially when they brought out that press, is this a game where we're going to see a ton of turnovers, a lot of offensive issues for this Illinois team, and it's just going to be one of those ugly ones where Rutgers just dictates the game in their building, and it wasn't that at all. From the very tip-off, Illinois was dominant. They dictated everything that went on in the game. I thought offensively, against a good Rutgers defense, they were about as impressive offensively as I've seen in a while for a team that has struggled so much on that end. But really, defensively, Illinois is really, really, really good. And I get it. This Rutgers team doesn't have a ton of go-to scorers or guys that jump off the page. They're not a great offensive team. But, man, Illinois, aside from like a 5-minute stretch and towards the end of the first half, Rutgers couldn't get anything going against this team. Illinois held them, I believe, to 28% from two, 33% overall. Obviously held them in the 50s. And man, it was just impressive to see with this team. You saw Coleman Hawkins come back into the lineup after missing the last three games with a knee injury. And, his numbers don't jump off the page. He's still having some issues offensively. I think the injury plays a part in that. But you saw the impact he made when he was on the floor defensively. Cliff Amore for Rutgers, 3 for 10 from the floor, 7 points. And I thought that was really impressive. I thought Terrence Shannon was by far the best player on the court, which is what you wanted to see on both ends. I mean, he was really good defensively, 23 points. If he shoots like this all year, and we're starting to get into a territory where we have a sample size, it's not just up. He had one of those nights like UCLA where he shot 8 for 9 and it's raising the percentage. Like, we're getting towards sample size territory where, hey, is he going to shoot 40-something% this year? And if he does, it'd be pretty huge for this team. But yeah, it's just really impressive. I get the opponent probably isn't going to be of the caliber of some other games you're going to see this year, but still, road game in the Big Ten, those are never easy to win. Illinois only went 2-8 on the road last year, so to already get off to a 1-0 start, I'm very encouraged by. And against a Rutgers team that I still think will be kind of pesky this year, to just own them like that and to leave no doubt, I thought it's really encouraging, especially heading into this upcoming week, which we'll get into in a little while.
Yeah, no doubt. One of my takeaways was towards the end of the first half, Rutgers goes on a little run. Uh, it's not even like Rutgers' offense was doing too much. It was a couple free throws, some turnovers. They got back in the game. But then the start of the second half, Illinois defense, I don't know the exact number, but I was with my friends watching it, and I think it was 12, maybe 13 minutes into the second half, and we're like, does Rutgers have 8 points right now in this half? And it was something like, I think they had 9 points in 13 minutes maybe. So just we've seen that a couple times in the bye games. Like I think it was Valpo, Terrence Shannon came out in the second half, just completely shut down the opposing team's star player. Illinois has this potential this year with this big lineup, big physical guys, versatility on switching defensively when Coleman's in there. They have the potential to just lock down teams on defense. I know this, like on our podcast, we've talked a lot about the offense, point guard struggles. Where's the offense going to come from? Our turnover is going to affect the team, whatever it was. But like we've been saying, this defense has the potential to win games in the Big Ten, and we saw it yesterday. And pairing it with a dominant offensive performance like we had yesterday, I mean, this team is just dangerous. Terrence Shannon starts. He starts the defensive push on the defensive end, of course. He can lock down the opposing team star player every single night, it seems like now. You got guys like Damask and Goody, Quincy Guerrier, they're rebounding really hard. Illinois is actually the number 1 rebounding team in the country right now that we just found out before the podcast. So you got rebounders, you got long, physical, athletic players, you got Coleman at the 5 position switching. Brett Underwood recruited these veteran guys, these talented, experienced guys. They know how to play defense. They can provide on offense sometimes. I know Damask, Guerrier, Harmon, they all contributed in the first half on offense, which was great to see. But consistently on defense, they're contributing as well. It's really great to see. Illinois top 10 defensive efficiency on KenPom right now. It's a dangerous team.
Yeah, you mentioned the rebounding. I think that was maybe the biggest thing that stood out from this entire game because when you look at this Illinois roster, that's something that we've talked about before. Like, this should be a huge strength of this team. You've got rebounders almost at every position. You have physicality and size at every position in this lineup and guys you can bring in off the bench as well. Like, this should be a team that never gets out physical in the game. I thought they kind of did at times against Marquette, which I was concerned about. But then you come into this Rutgers game and, man, the Steve Peichel Rutgers teams, I mean, their whole MO is physicality, toughness, and Illinois was by far the more physical and tough team in that game yesterday. 55-27 was the rebounding differential against a Rutgers team that you just never see that against. I think the craziest stat from the whole game was Illinois had 19 offensive rebounds. Rutgers had 18 defensive rebounds. So Illinois had more offensive rebounds than Rutgers had defensive rebounds. And I thought that was huge. Everybody was crashing the offensive glass. Like, that's going to be such a key for this team. We know that, what this game isn't solving the offense. I think there's still things. This is going to be a work in progress on the offensive end. There's going to be lulls. I don't think this team is ever going to get to a point where they're a top-notch offensive team in college basketball. So I think a key is going to be, man, if they can get on the offensive glass consistently, there's no reason they shouldn't be one of the better offensive rebounding teams. not only in the Big Ten, but nationally. And if they can create second chance opportunities like they were doing all the time yesterday, like that's just such a help to a team that maybe isn't going to be the most explosive offensive team. But with that said, I thought the offense looked as good as it has all season yesterday. I thought guys were really moving the basketball. There was guys that were just attacking gaps in that Rutgers defense, kicking out the shooters, guys driving. Marcus Damask, a guy we haven't mentioned yet, 15 points. I mean, we talked about it 2 weeks ago when we were kind of going through player evaluations, and we were wondering, Damask he looked great in that Marquette game, but man, a lot of these bye games, he hasn't looked great. He's looked kind of lost, but maybe he just shows up when the lights are brightest in these biggest games, because he played really well, 15 points, like working him out of that mid post area where he can back down guys and use his size from that wing spot. Like, he is really crafty and patient at that, and he got some easy buckets doing that. So just some of these wrinkles that we saw. And Terrence Shannon, I thought, had a really good day, not only just shooting the ball and scoring, which he was a dominant force, but he made some really nice passes and was moving the basketball and was using his downhill ability to create shots for other guys. And like, if you can just get contributions from different guys and play team offense, that's how you win without a point guard. And I think yesterday is kind of a blueprint to how you want to see this team play. And of course, you mentioned it a bit earlier. I think if there's one concern to draw from this game, it's you turn it over 17 times. And when Rutgers pressed you, it was a little ugly at times. It is something that I'm thinking about. Like, yeah, I think there's going to be quite a bit of Big Ten teams that are going to pull out some type of pressure, some type of full court press on Illinois just to test them, because I think that's an easy way to turn them over. But if that's the only thing I'm taking from this game, and you turn it over 17 times and you win by 20 points, I think that bodes pretty well. So, it was just such a complete performance on both ends, and really encouraged by that for sure. But the rebounding thing to me was the thing that stood out the most.
Yeah, I think even the half court offense was, to me, it seemed improved. That one Ty Rogers drove to the hoop. He jumped out of bounds, found a wide open shooter. I think it might have been Justin Harmon, knocked it down. He had a couple assists on the day. A couple just beautiful possessions of all five guys touching the ball, ending in a wide open three. I think Goody might have had one of those. Just awesome to see. Stuff you just did not really see last year. We've talked a lot about guys, or certain guys last year that were ball stoppers or possession stoppers. They get the ball and the shots just going up. There's still some of that this year, but there's less of it, and it's more Terrence Shannon's averaging 20 points a game. It makes a little bit more sense if he's the one doing that this year. But overall, even without a true point guard like we've been saying, just offensive consistency looked a lot better yesterday. Turnovers, of course, an issue. I think even when we weren't turning it over on the press, there were some possessions where we finally get over half court after 8 or 9 seconds, and then we're just kind of passing it around. And there were some not great possessions where we're just putting up a shot with 3 seconds left on the shot clock. But it's fixable. Maybe teams would start pressing us now after seeing that. Maybe they don't. We'll see. We can adjust. I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, and it's not something that every team really has in their bag either. Rutgers is a team that's been a staple of what they've done. I think you might see teams that might give it a try, but also I think Illinois will get better at that aspect as the season goes on. And I think I think the difference I saw in the press break was when Coleman Hawkins got into foul trouble and was on the bench, it felt like he is that guy that stands kind of at half court and is a guy that can help you break it. And when he wasn't in the game, I thought Ty Rogers was forcing cross-court passes, and there were just some clunkiness there. So I'm not super concerned about that. It's definitely something that I think we'll come back into contact with. But yeah, the half-court offense was as good as we've seen. I thought they threw some new wrinkles in there. I thought they ran a few more sets than they usually do, but also I just thought the ball movement and the flow to it was as good as we've seen. But I want to focus a little bit more on the defensive end before we move on to previewing, because right now, this team's one of the best defensive teams in college basketball. You look at some of the numbers. You mentioned it, eighth in defensive efficiency on KenPom. They're number one 2-point field goal defense in the country so far this year. Number one effective field goal percentage defense in the country. Number two in assist rate defense in the country. What that tells me is teams can't get into a flow against them. There's a lot of isolation, late clock shots. I believe they are top 10 in the country in percentage of shots opponents are taking from 3-point range, which is a Brad Underwood staple. He's a guy that wants to force teams into twos, wants to take away the 3-point line. And when you pair that with the number one 2-point percentage defense in the country, I think it's a winning formula for this team. But you just kind of look at the lineup. I think Ty Rodgers and Terrence Shannon have been phenomenal point of attack defenders this year, great screen navigators, guys that I think are really good staying in front of perimeter guards, even though they're bigger and they're maybe not as quick laterally as some other guards. Like, they've been fantastic. Gary A has been as physical of a defender as I've seen from the 4 spot for Illinois in a long time. I wasn't sure what we were going to get from him defensively, but man, he's just playing strong. He's kind of been an immovable body. And then obviously getting Coleman back is huge as well. Like, this team, you mentioned it, like it in one of the first things you said, like, I think defense is a reason that this team can be a Big Ten top of the conference team. And like, I think the question became heading into this game. Now, again, is Rutgers one of the best offensive teams in the country? No. But we saw them be very good on the defensive end against a bunch of bye teams, against a bunch of teams in the 300s on KenPom. What is it going to look like on the road against a high major team? And the answer is it looked really dominant. And now we'll get to in a few minutes, there's going to be a couple tests coming up this week where we'll really see how good they are. But the pieces are aligning. The advanced metrics look phenomenal so far. Like, this could be Brad Underwood's best defensive team that he's had. And I think that is the path for this team being a true national contender.
I just don't think there's too many weaknesses on the defensive end as well. Maybe you look at the freshmen, maybe. I mean, Dre Gibbs-Lovehorn didn't even play yesterday. Moretti's still hurt. Hansberry can be a bit of a liability, but
I think Damask and Goody are matchup, certain matchups are going to cause them problems, but I think if they're your one weak link, I think you can hide them pretty easily.
Exactly. If your concern is your 7th or 6th or 7th man's matchup when he comes in the game, I think overall you're going to be fine on defense. And if it's Luke Goody guarding 6'8" KJ Adams from Kansas, maybe that's an issue, but I don't know how much that's going to happen in the Big Ten. But anyways, Brad Underwood's teams have been consistently good on defense, like the past 4 or 5 years since Illinois has been good. It's been the calling card of some teams, and defense wins games in March, and it hasn't really translated to too much March success for Illinois in the actual NCAA tournament. I know it's early December, things can change, but it's looking good right now. Just the switchability, the length, like 6'11" Coleman Hawkins. Dane Danger comes off the bench. Not great on defense, but he'll grab some rebounds. He can block some shots. He can be a bit of a force in the paint. Gary A's rebounding at 6'8", 6'9". Goody Domaska rebounding. Like, your backcourt is 6'5" Ty Rodgers and 6'5" Terrence Shannon. It's going to be difficult for teams to score on this Illinois team just simply based on the length. Last year the defense was still good, and we were like playing 4 freshmen. Got a couple transfers. You had like 2 returning players from last year's team, and I want to say they were still top 30. So Brad Underwood just knows how to get defense out of his players. Defense leads to transition, which Illinois is really good at. I mean, Terrence Shannon had a couple great transition plays. Luke Goody loves running in transition, hitting some wide open threes. It just looks really good right now. I know it's early. We've had 2 games against some actual like high major teams. We'll see in the upcoming weeks how we look against some of these potential national contenders in FAU and Tennessee. It's going to be interesting to see, but I think I would bet on, this isn't really a hot take, but I think I would bet on Illinois' defense staying in the top 10 in KenPom over like the Illinois offense improving a ton, which isn't crazy to say, but I'm pretty confident in it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I don't think this is a fluke. I don't think this is something where they're going to go from 8th to 28th by the time the season's over. I think if there's going to be any drop off, it's from 8th to like 12th. I think this is one of the better defensive teams in the country. And the funny thing is, you mentioned transition there. This Illinois team's actually been one of the worst in the country at forcing turnovers, 347th, which is just so weird. Like, that's something, positive regression is coming on that front. Like,
I think so.
that's something that with this team and the individual defenders they have, they're going to force more. So the fact that they're this good defensively and they're not even forcing any turnovers, this is all just coming in the half court and preventing teams from scoring without turning them over. Like, that is, imagine if they do start turning people over and they get a little more aggressive and maybe pull out a couple, 3/4 court, full court pressure packages on some teams in certain matchups. Like, all of a sudden you could take even another step forward. So I'm by far the most encouraged about that. And yesterday I thought that's what won them the game, as good as they were offensively, and to score 76 and to have the efficiency they had against Rutgers, really impressive. But Rutgers never had a chance to really come back into the game because Illinois couldn't let them get a good look and was just so good on that end of the floor. And this roster makeup, I think that's, that when we talked about the concerns coming in, I think a lot of them came coming into the season. I think a lot of them came offensively when you talk about a lack of a point guard and all that type of stuff and the lack of shooting. But, I think the strength of this roster and what it was built to be was always defensively dominant. And the fact that you have, like you mentioned, the size and the toughness and the strength 1 through 5 in the lineup, like that is what Brad Underwood wants to do. And I would bet on him putting together a really good defensive team, because like you mentioned last year, I think there were some liabilities. I think there were some obvious flaws defensively for them, and they were still, I believe, 20-something in defensive efficiency in the country. So that's what Brad Underwood does, and I'm excited about the defensive potential of this team.
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook for this college basketball season. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks and predictions throughout the college basketball season. And we are going to have special offers for you, the listeners and the viewers on the Field of 68 each and every week during the season. If you haven't signed up with BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FIELD1500 and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager on BetMGM Sportsbook. Here's what you got to do. Download the BetMGM app. Sign up using the bonus code FIELD1500. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if that bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FIELD1500 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available under one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient for me when I have to go cover games in New York or Philly. When crossing state borders, just log into your existing account instead of having to create new accounts in each state that you go to. And most importantly, I got to let you know, we do have some fun stuff coming up for this college basketball season. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boosts, my personal favorite, parlay odds boosts. So download the BetMGM app today.
But I do want to talk about this week, because we're going to get more tests this week for this team. We'll come back to this discussion next Sunday, and maybe it'll be different, or maybe it'll even be reinforced, but we'll find out because there are two big-time matchups for the Illini this week, starting on Tuesday in the Jimmy V Classic at Madison Square Garden against Florida Atlantic, who went to the Final Four last year, obviously. And then on Saturday, they go on the road, the beginning of a home-and-home series against Tennessee, who has lost a couple in a row here, but came into the season, preseason top 10. So two big-time tests. We'll start on Tuesday. We'll kind of break each of these down a little bit. Not going to go crazy with them, but we'll kind of get you ready for each of these games. Starting Tuesday, Florida Atlantic. This is a Florida Atlantic team, obviously Final Four team from last year, best mid-major in the country from last year. We all saw them on a national stage and how good and lethal they are on the offensive end. This year, they come into this game, I believe, 7-1. It will be their record heading into Tuesday night. Their one loss was kind of a perplexing one. They lost to Bryant. But other than that, they've looked really good. I believe that they've put up 90 points in 3 of their last 4 games. They won the ESPN Events Invitational in Orlando during Feast Week, beat Texas A&M, put 96 on them. That's a ranked Texas A&M team. So they're playing really good basketball here of late. I was I was wondering after that Bryant loss, was this team getting overvalued a little bit because they went to the Final Four last year? Is this really a top 10, 15 team? I think I may have been wrong for questioning that because that looks like more of a fluke than what they really are. So what do you see in this matchup? How excited are you for this one, Illinois, Florida Atlantic?
Super excited. Jimmy V Classic's always awesome in Madison Square Garden. I forget what the other matchup of the night is, but I think it's really
I believe
good
it's
too. I'm sure
UConn,
it
North
is.
Carolina is the nightcap.
Yeah, that should be awesome then. Like you're saying, FAU Final Four team last year pretty much returned every key piece, returned every starter. They got the two co-conference players of the year, John L. Davis, Elijah Martin, which is very interesting for their conference because naming two player of the years from the same team is crazy. But anyways, they return every starter. They got massive Vlad Golden, who's improved a lot this year in the paint. Yeah, I think he's a 7-foot center. Like a couple more like rotational guards that'll get you like 10 points a night. They're a really solid team. We saw made that Final Four run last year, pretty much one shot away from the national championship actually, which was insane as a 9 seed. Really solid team, experienced. A lot of their guys are pretty old now. They returned for their super senior years. I think they'll be ready to go. People are talking about how our length, like we've been talking about how our length and versatility on defense is causing problems for everybody. People are saying it's going to cause problems for FAU too because they're a bit smaller, a bit like people think Illinois will be faster. I'm not too sold on that. Like we saw FAU just beat Texas A&M. They won 4 or 5 games in March last year. Like I think they'll be ready to play against a physical Illinois team. But that being said, I do think like just because FAU went to the Final Four last year and Illinois struggled last year, just because they're ranked higher, I think these teams are pretty evenly matched, honestly. They've got talent in the backcourt. We've got Terrence Shannon in the backcourt. I don't want to say Coleman Hawkins can like limit Vlad Golden because Vlad Golden, he's a force. Like we saw that in some March games last year. He's been really solid this year. He's hitting his shots at like 75%, which is insane. But I think Coleman can help limit what he's doing on the glass, what he's doing in the paint. Dane and Quincy, Amani, possibly. Like we've been saying, our length, it's crazy. We got like these physical, athletic guys from top to bottom in our lineup. FAU, I mean, they'll be ready. They got a great coach. They're returning everybody. It's going to be a great game. I don't want to put a score prediction. I think it will be close. I think it will come down to the wire. I'm thinking like in the 70s, but I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's going to be strength versus strength here, right? Florida Atlantic, really, really good offensive team, top 10 in the country, offensive efficiency in KenPom, 7th currently. Team that has shot the ball from 3 extremely well the last 2 years. I think they were top 50 last year. Now they're in the top 40 so far this year. You look at their last 5 scoring outputs, and these are against some really good basketball teams. 91, 96, 84, 83, 90 are the last 5 games for Florida Atlantic on the offensive end. Those came against 3 high major teams in Butler, Texas A&M, and Virginia Tech at the ESPN Invitational over last weekend. And then 2 of the top mid-major teams in the country, Liberty and Charleston, at the Field of 68 Invitational over this past weekend. So, or tip-off, I mean. So they are a really good offensive team. Illinois, we just went on and on about them defensively. So it's strength versus strength in this game. And whoever's has the bigger strength is going to end up winning this game. I'm really excited to see because we'll really get a true indicator of, is this really one of the best defensive teams in the country? If they can hold down this FAU offense, that will be their statement made so far this year. So I'm really excited to see that. You mentioned the point earlier on about, the physicality and the size of Illinois maybe giving FAU some trouble. I do agree with you. I think this isn't your normal mid-major basketball team. These are some good athletes. These are really good players. I think they actually are a little bigger than people give them credit for. They've got some longer guys you can bring off the bench. I think when they play their 3-guard lineup, when you have Greenlee, Janelle Davis, and Elijah Martin, they can get a little bit smaller. That's where I would think, hey, maybe Illinois can frustrate them. This is probably going to be one of the longer, more physical teams Florida Atlantic has seen in a long time. At the same time, I think they saw that in the NCAA tournament last year and didn't have a whole lot of issue with it. So really, I think it's just going to come down to execution. We know how good Florida Atlantic is on the offensive end. They're really just a good free-flowing offense. Everything that we kind of said that Illinois was showing against Rutgers, that's what they do on a consistent basis. They get paint touches, they penetrate, they kick the shooters. Golden is a force inside. If he gets free, he's a dump off option in the paint and can do a lot of damage in there. He's also really good rim runner. Like Coleman Hawkins needs to run the floor and make sure that he doesn't get out in transition, because he runs the floor as well as any 7-1 force of a big man that I've seen. That's what they try to do. So Illinois defensively, it's going to come down to execution for them. We know they're going to try to take away the 3-point line, stay connected to shooters. That's what Brad Underwood always wants to do. It's going to be really important in this game. If you can force Florida Atlantic into some tougher twos, that's the game plan here. You don't want to leave their shooters free. You don't want them to get hot from three, because as we've seen, they can drop 90 on your head if you give them open shots. So I'm excited for this matchup, because it is going to be big time strength versus big time strength, top 10 offense versus top 10 defense. Florida Atlantic, though, they haven't been a bad defensive team. Illinois still has to come to play offensively. Terrence Shannon should be, again, like, he's got to be the best player on the court. Florida Atlantic's got good guards, but man, you got to come to play and give us 20-something and just take over at times like he's done in some of these bigger games. He's going to be a key for Illinois. Coleman Hawkins, if he can start giving you something on the offensive end, if he can make it a 3 or 2 early and pull Golden away from the rim and make him respect Coleman's 3-point shot, that's going to be huge, because Golden can be a big-time rim protector. You want to get him as far away from the basket as possible, out of help position, so that Terrence can go to work and Ty can go to work and Damas can try to get inside. So I think this is going to be a high-level game. This is one where I feel like Illinois, this is one where the matchup aligns itself, where, like, if you really are as good of a defensive team as we think they can be, like, this is one I think Illinois should and can win. It's going to be tough. I think Florida Atlantic's going to be favored, but I kind of like this matchup for Illinois. I think they can hold down Florida Atlantic's offense enough. I think that they have the guys that can get inside and score on this Florida Atlantic defense, which has holes, and is going to have a big size mismatch across the court. I think Illinois should win this basketball game if they play well enough. If they play like they did yesterday, I think they win this game. But it's going to come down to defensive execution, and you're going to have to hold down this Florida Atlantic team. I'm not asking you to hold them to 50-something, but hold them down into the 70s and keep them off the 3-point line. And I think Illinois could have some success in this one.
I think if we hold them in the 70s, we win, honestly. They've got star players, but they don't have one guy that's like averaging 7 more points per game than the rest of them. They're pretty consistent, like Golden, Martin, Davis, all in the like 10 to 15 point per game range, I want to say. My issue is, I know it's not an exact mirror image because Tyler Kolek is like an anomaly in college basketball. FAU doesn't have a Tyler Kolek, but we saw against Marquette's strength, obviously their offense, top 10 in the country, I'm pretty sure, just like FAU. And Illinois loses that game. The defense was honestly fine, but the offense struggled. I know the offense was great against Rutgers yesterday, but I'm still just not sold. I know FAU's defense isn't like top tier in the country, but I feel like I need to see more. I mean, we just lost a game to Marquette where obviously our strength is defense compared to their offense, and it's a similar case, not exactly mirror images like I was just saying, but I'm not fully confident. FAU is a well-coached team. They've beat really good teams before. They beat Kansas State last year, Tennessee last year, almost beat SDSU last year in the tournament. They're a solid team. Already beat Texas A&M this year. I will say, Vlad Golden is very foul-prone. Like, he could pick up 2 fouls in like the span of 2 minutes. If Illinois is able to do that, I think the game changes completely. Like, he's averaging 3 fouls a game last year. He was in foul trouble a couple times in the tournament last year. If Dane or maybe Terrence drives to the hoop, gets a foul on Vlad early, that will completely change the game, completely open the paint, because FAU is not too big, like in terms of their front court outside Vlad.
They don't really have a backup for him, no.
Exactly,
if you get him off the court, you're going to be in good shape.
So I don't know if that's a possible game plan, but definitely something to look for. If he picks up a foul early, that completely changes the tides of the game.
Yeah, no, I want to see Illinois put pressure on the rim and make him come over and help and maybe foul, pick up a couple cheap fouls. You know, it's Coleman's not a guy who's going to really back a 7-1 big man down and try to get him to foul him in the post. So I think that's where you're really going to, you know, unless you want to give Dane Dange some minutes and try to, you know, I don't know. Dane Dange is, he hasn't looked great this year. So I don't know. You know, if Coleman's playing well, I think you ride with him and you really just try to pull him away from the basket. Coleman's got to show he can be a threat from outside and make Golden respect him, and that way you can open up the lane a little bit. But also, I just put pressure on him, and if he blocks your shot, fine. But try to get him into foul trouble. I think that could be a huge key. But you're totally right in the fact that this offense is far from fixed because they had 76 points against Rutgers. Like, it was an encouraging offensive performance. I'm still very curious to see, especially if we get into crunch time again, if we get into a close game again, I get concerned because we saw how that went against Marquette. Illinois just couldn't generate good possessions, and you're going up against another elite offensive team. Like, you get into a tie game at the under 4 timeout and you need quality possessions. I have a lot more confidence that Florida Atlantic is going to generate those than Illinois is, and that could end up being the difference in the game. Now, again, Illinois can do what they need to do defensively and not make that matter as much. But at the end of the day, I think there's a certain aspect where Florida Atlantic is going to get theirs at some point. So you're going to have to keep up. You're going to have to get into the 70s. But also, if it gets late in the game, like, you got to execute. You got to find who you want to handle the basketball. You got to find who you want to run offense through. I think Terrence Shannon has proven that he's capable of creating his own shot and being a go-to guy, but you're still going to need to give him some help there. We've seen even late in the Marquette game when you're trying to ask him to create everything for you, he can be turnover prone. You even saw that against Rutgers. He had 5 turnovers, but couldn't be less concerned about that given what else he gave you in that game. But yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I'm not trying to say that the offense is still going to be a key for this game. I think it's the strength versus strength. Florida Atlantic's offense against Illinois defensively is going to be the big test and the key matchup in the game, but Illinois still got to score. Illinois got to build off that game against Rutgers on the offensive end for sure. And that's going to be really important. Should we give a prediction for this game, or do you want to just leave it?
I'll go. I think it's going to be like, what was the Marquette game? 71 to
71-64.
71-64. I mean, I'm thinking in that range. I hope the Illinois offense has improved a bit. I mean, I'm going to say like 75-73. I'll just go Illinois for the hell of it.
I'm going to go Illinois as well. I don't know. I've had a feeling about this game for a while, even since the schedule came out. Now, I had a terrible feeling about Saturday, and they blew them out. So maybe that's a bad sign that I have a good feeling about this one. They're going to look terrible. But no, I don't know. I just think Illinois, like, they're going to impose themselves physically again. Florida Atlantic, I think, might put up one of their worst offensive performances of the season going against this physical Illinois defense that's going to try to keep them off the 3-point line. And I think Illinois can do enough on the offensive end, just enough. And they're going to have Terrence Shannon on the court, and I don't think Florida Atlantic has anybody that can match up with him. I think that's where you go late in the game, and hopefully he can knock some shots down and do what he did a few times last year and has already done at times this year and just kind of take over the game. I'm going Illinois 77-73 over the Florida Atlantic Owls on Tuesday night. Another game this week, another huge one. Let's get to that one to close out the show here. Saturday morning, this is going to be an 11 a.m. Central Time tip-off on CBS. That is quite unique for Illinois to be playing 11 a.m. on CBS. I can't wait for it. That'll be awesome. But this game is going to take place in Knoxville against the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee started the season as a top 10 team, a pretty consensus top 10 team, has lost 3 games in a row now. They went to Maui, lost to Purdue by 4, lost to Kansas. There's no shame in either of those losses. And then they go to North Carolina in kind of an uncharacteristic performance for them. They give up 100 points to North Carolina on the road this past week. and lose that game 100-92. But I still think this is a top 10 caliber team when they're playing their best basketball. Even with that 100-point North Carolina output on Wednesday, they're number 3 in the country in defensive efficiency on KenPom. This is always going to be an elite defensive team under Rick Barnes, especially with this roster. A huge test on the road for Illinois offensively going in there. We know that, we talk about Illinois being physical, being good on the glass. Tennessee is all those things and has been all those things. I mean, they're as physical a team as you'll find in all of college basketball. They're not going to be afraid to put you on the free throw line and foul you. As we saw in that Purdue-Tennessee game in Maui, I think there were 78 combined free throw attempts in that game. Purdue shot 48. Not all 48 of them were legitimate, but a lot of them were. Tennessee fouls quite a bit. But the point being that they are a really physical team, great defensive team. I'm not reading too much into North Carolina there. I think North Carolina is part of that was they were making everything in that game. But Tennessee, this is going to be as tough a game as Illinois is going to see all year when you consider the environment, when you consider the opponent. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be a challenge. I'm not reading a ton into Tennessee's 3-game losing streak. I think they're still really good. The one factor to watch is Dalton Connect, Tennessee, the transfer that they picked up this offseason. He rolled his ankle in the not the fourth quarter, not playing in the NBA, in the second half of that North Carolina game and left the game. So second time this year that an opposing star is going to be hobbled with an ankle injury coming in, so we'll monitor that one. But if he plays, he's been phenomenal. We'll watch that. But Illinois, Tennessee, how you feeling about this one Saturday morning?
I mean, do we have an update on his health, or is it just
I haven't seen anything.
His ankle?
Yeah,
Okay.
it didn't look great. I mean, he rolled it pretty good. It was with a minute to go in the North Carolina game. It was after he got fouled, so then he wasn't able to take the free throws, so they had to rule him out the rest of the game. And then I don't believe that they play again until Tuesday against George Mason, so I guess we'll find out. Would not be shocked if he sat out that game regardless of if he's fine or not, just to kind of get the extra time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a game the North Carolina game, that's a game where Dalton Connect is 37 points, which is crazy. Their offense begins with him, ends with him. They've got some solid role players on offense, but like you've been saying, offense is not their calling card. Their defense gives up 100 points and is still ranked number 3 in the country, which is crazy. Just goes to show how good they've been the rest of the year when they're not giving up 50 free throws to Zach Edey. But anyways, they've got Dalton Connect on offense, but then outside of that, it's a lot of role players. You've got Vescovi, he hasn't been great this year, honestly, as a 5th-year guy, but he'll have games where he can turn up and hit 5 threes or something. They've got Josiah Jordan James as well, who's pretty consistent offensively. Other than that, they've got their big men's Jonas Idu. I mean, I've watched him play a little bit. He was fine against he did pretty well against Dickinson on Kansas, actually, which was surprising. So he's somebody to worry about a little bit outside of Connect on offense. But their defense with Zakai Ziegler at point guard, when he's healthy, when he's playing, he's still struggled a bit this year coming off the injury from last season. But their defense, it's going to force turnovers no matter who they're playing, especially Illinois without their point guard, who's committing however many turnovers a game, 15 or 17 yesterday. That's going to be something to watch for sure. We'll see how they do against FAU in terms of turnovers, and maybe FAU's pressing. Tennessee does something similar. We'll see if something like that happens. But I think this game is going to be a rock fight. I know it's still a week away, but I'm not picturing this game being in the 70s at all. Both teams, obviously, still top 10 in defensive efficiency on KenPom. I see this game, maybe both teams shooting 33% from the floor. I think it could get ugly. I know, especially if Connect's injured, because Tennessee's offense outside of Dalton Connect is not going to look good, in my opinion, especially against this Illinois defense. If he's healthy, it's a different story. I still think Terrence Shannon, Ty Rodgers, some other guys can definitely limit him to less than 37 points, like North Carolina couldn't do. But anyways, I think this game is going to be low scoring. I think it's going to be probably high turnovers from the Illinois offense, probably look a little shaky. I think this would be a really good game for Coleman Hawkins to get going. I mean, any game would be a good game for him to get going. Even FAU, like if he's hitting a three early, like you said, or getting golden in foul trouble. But anyways, we're going to need some contributions on offense outside of Terrence Shannon for this game. I think it's a game where Luke Goody, if he gets some open looks, he's going to be need to be hitting them like he has this season. He's shooting 45% from three with Terrence Shannon,
fantastic.
Which is crazy. He's been awesome. But anyways, guys like Gary A, guys like Domask, they've played in 100 college basketball games, just like pretty much all of Tennessee's roster has. It's going to be a battle of really good defensive teams, really experienced teams, really well-coached teams, in a great Knoxville environment. Going to be really fun to watch, even if the game is not great offensively, not really a fast-paced, high-scoring game. Regardless, going to be really fun. Can't wait to see an Illinois game on CBS.
Yeah, I think in terms of how you picture this game, I think it has a lot of similarities to how you probably pictured yesterday's game going. Obviously, the opponent is a lot better. But in terms of, you expect it to be really ugly, slow-paced, a half-court game. I think that this is exactly what it's going to be. I'm with you. If there was any game that was going to be in the 50s in terms of a final score, I could see it being this one for sure. Like, I think it could get ugly that way. If Dalton Knecht is for some reason out, that would completely change how I view this game, because as you mentioned there, he is the catalyst of their offense. I mean, they have struggled on the offensive end the last two seasons. They bring him in, I believe, from Northern Colorado, and he has been everything for their offense. He's single-handedly turned things around, and it's really just because you can run everything through him. He's a good playmaker, but he's a guy that just can create his own shot. He's so crafty, great shooter. And like, that's the guy that's going to be on the scouting report number one. If you can take him out of the game, you're going to have a lot of success, but it's pretty hard to take him out of the game. I hope he plays, because Terrence Shannon versus him would be a phenomenal matchup. I think that would be awesome. So I hope he plays. I hope these two teams are at full strength, but obviously if he doesn't, that'd change how I view the game. But regardless, Illinois' offense is going to get a massive test in this game. Tennessee really good defensively. And the biggest thing is that they are just going to get up in your grill. Ball pressure is the key to what they do. They're going to pick you up three-quarter court and just get in your grill. Like, if Ty Rodgers is bringing the basketball up, or if other guys are being asked to do it, like, they have to be really strong with the ball. And it's a situation where you absolutely could turn it over 17 more times. They can press. They're not always going to all out full court, like 1-2-2 full court pressure like Rutgers did, but they are going to have a guy that is hounding the ball handler from at least three-quarter court distance for most of the game. And they want to get in your grill. They don't want to give you any room to work with. They want to cut off all driving lanes, make you move it around the perimeter and take contested shots. Illinois is going to have to find a way to penetrate and break down their defense, which is tough to do. We saw North Carolina have some success doing it, so it's not a flawless team defensively. But Illinois is going to really have to come to play, and they're going to have to get good performances out of their top guys. I think the biggest weakness that Tennessee has had has been defending opposing big men. Like you mentioned, I think Jonas Adu is fine, but they've played some elite ones. I'll just leave it at that. Zach Edey had 22 and 10 on him, I think. Dickinson had 17 points, 20 rebounds on him, and then Armando Bacot had 22 points and 11 rebounds on him on Wednesday. And when you look at, trying to exploit a weakness in their defense, I don't think Illinois has a big man that can necessarily do that. That's not really Coleman Hawkins' game, is to dominate on the interior. Maybe it's a game where Dane Danger could give him some issues if he comes to play, could give you an offensive spark and put some pressure on them in the paint. Definitely something you could possibly keep an eye on, but I just think Illinois, again, you got to get good play from your top offensive guys. You got to get Terrence Shannon has got to handle the pressure, the ball pressure well, and has got to create opportunities by just getting downhill, forcing the issue inside, not allowing Tennessee to frustrate him on the perimeter. If you could draw some things up, this is a game where I'd like to see a little bit more structure on offense. I think if you just let Illinois kind of free flow things, I think it could go poorly. If you could design some sets, if you could include some more just wrinkles in the offense to just get Marcus Damask a touch in the mid post, or get Coleman Hawkins in the middle of the paint trying to create, or get a downhill lane for Terrence Shannon. Like I think this is a game where you want to see more designs from this Illinois offense, but I think this is going to be a great matchup. Another one where, hey, you might get into a rock fight, an ugly game. Well, you've got the defensive ability to be right in that game in the end. If Tennessee is frustrating you and turning you over and you're not having a lot of success offensively, well, Illinois has the ability to just make it ugly and match that. And if they're being held to 50, they can hold Tennessee to 50. Illinois can win these ugly games this year. I think they've proven that already just based on how good they've been on the defensive end. But man, road environment, this is a Tennessee arena in Knoxville that holds 20,000. It's going to be really intimidating. This is one where you got to rely on your experience. I think Brad Underwood is going to rely on experience just like he did yesterday. We didn't see Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn get off the bench. Monty Hansberry got in there only because everyone was in foul trouble. He got 2 fouls quickly, looked a little overwhelmed. And then didn't play in the second half. So Brad's going to rely on experience in this game. I think you got guys that, have been in this now, and they handled it extremely well yesterday against Rutgers. Now, the RAC is a tough place to play. It's probably not quite the level of Knoxville, but it's a tough place to play. And Illinois' experience handled it really well. And they got off to such a great start. That's the key in these games. If you can go on the road and throw the first punch like Illinois did against Rutgers, they never look back after that. If you let Tennessee dictate things, you turn it over a couple times early, you go on a quick scoring drought in the first 4 or 5 minutes, that's where you get into trouble. But if Illinois can start like they did yesterday, that is how you control a game on the road. Easier said than done against Tennessee for sure, but that's what I'm going to be looking for.
You're totally right about that. I was just going to mention that if this is a game where Illinois goes down, this might be drastic, but if they go down like 10-4 at the under 16 timeout, something like that, Tennessee is not a team you really come back on. Like, I know they've lost 3 in a row, like we've been saying. Those are 3 ranked teams, 3 great big men. But Illinois, I don't picture this a game where you go down, where you're down at the break, and then you get some miraculous offensive comeback like you did against UCLA and Texas last year and Northwestern last year at home. Just not the type of game this is going to be. At least that's what we think a week away from it. Things could change if Dalton connects out. Maybe, I don't know. Things could change for sure. But this is a game where Illinois has to get going early, rely on Terrence Shannon, don't get in foul trouble. Guys like Coleman Hawkins can't be having mental lapses. They're going to force turnovers, but you got to find a way to limit it somehow. Ty Rodgers has to be on his game. Like you said, we're not going to see the freshmen much. It's going to be guys like Harmon, Damask, Goody off the bench, Dane Danges. Hopefully he's contributing. I mentioned Jonas Adu locking down Hunter Dickinson. I was totally wrong about that. I was thinking of the Marquette Oso Ighodaro kind of locked Hunter Dickinson down. I got those Maui games confused. But yeah, if Dane Danger could be a threat on offense this game, that would be massive, because you're actually right. Tennessee doesn't have great front court depth outside of Adu. But it's going to be a full team effort, like the FAU game, like the Rutgers game was. These are all tough teams. Tennessee especially, like we've been saying on defense, top 3 in the country. Get going early, try to limit turnovers, hit free throws at the end of the game if it comes down to that. I really don't want to see this be a game where Illinois starts to chuck threes like we've seen in the past. This Rutgers game yesterday, Illinois was passing up open threes, which was like, you could tell that that was a talking point in the locker room after some of these games early on in the season where we're shooting 35 threes a game. So I think this could potentially be a game where they try to rely on the 3 too much and it's their downfall. We'll see. It's 6 days away. We got one more game in between. Like we've been saying, it's going to be really fun to watch. Can't wait for it. Awesome environment. I agree. I hope Dalton Connect comes to play. That it would be a matchup between him and Shannon. That's like at this point in the season, that's 2 probably consensus All-Americans at this point. Really fun to watch. 2 great teams. Can't wait for it.
Yeah, it should be great. I totally agree with you on that as well. I thought against Rutgers, like Illinois was passing up open shots to just continue to put pressure on Rutgers by driving the basketball and getting even better looks. And I thought all the looks they got from three were really good ones. What do you know? They shoot 9 of 21. Like, that's just the formula for them. You not forcing things. You're playing to your strength. You're creating really good looks for your best shooters. And those guys are often going to make them. That's Luke Goody. That's Damask. Justin Harmon made a couple. So, and then obviously Terrence has shot it unbelievably well. If he shoots like this, man, they're going to be really good. I hope he keeps it up. But yeah, the one other thing I get a little concerned about in this game, and I mentioned at the beginning, Tennessee fouls all the time. They are not going to be afraid to foul you. Illinois free throw shooting, that still isn't something that has totally been corrected. They shot 7 of 11 against Rutgers, but they weren't at the line a ton. They are still in the bottom 20 in all of Division I in free throw shooting. That could be something that hurts them in this game. And Tennessee is probably going to come in. Rick Barton's going to tell his guys, like, be as physical as you can with this team. If you pick up some fouls, we'll sub you out. But this team's not going to beat you at the free throw line. Make them beat you at the free throw line. I think that Illinois might get a lot of free throw attempts in this game. They're going to have to make them. It's going to be a game with probably a lot of whistles, as we've seen, but obviously a road game, so maybe some of those won't go your way. So that's one concern that I could see in this game for sure. But I totally agree with everything you said. Should be an awesome week. Let's give a prediction for this one and then get out of here. Illinois at Tennessee. Can we make it a 3-0 3-game stretch, or is this one going to be too tall a task?
It's tough predicting this before the FAU game. I think the FAU game is going to tell us a lot, actually. But, I mean, I don't see a win here, I'll be honest. I've been kind of pessimistic on this podcast, but like talking about the issues in the Rutgers game, if the issue in the Rutgers game is like your press break, that's not too big a concern. Like, I still think this team's really good. I do not think we're going to get this win at Tennessee. I don't think it'll actually be in the 50s, but I want to say, like, Tennessee usually holds their opponents to somewhere in the 60s. So I'll go like 65. I'll go 65-60. I think we keep it close. I could totally see this be a game where we're missing a ton of 3-point shots towards the end of the game, potentially missing free throws, turning it over at late, like, crucial parts in the game, sort of like the Marquette game. I don't see a win here. Hopefully the FAU game is a win, and that kind of offsets the losing another quad one opportunity here. But we'll see. You never know.
Yeah, I think if you win the FAU game, you're set yourself into a position where you feel like the pressure's kind of off a little bit, like the win would be phenomenal. But a loss, I think you still have positioned yourself fine by beating Rutgers, beating FAU. But I'm with you. I think we're on the same page in both these games. It's such a tough road game for this team. You're probably going to be, based on what we're predicting, they're going to be coming off a high on Tuesday if they beat FAU, and then you go into this tough place to play. I think it's going to be a really hungry Tennessee team because they've lost 3 in a row now. They played George Mason this week. That's not a game to get up for. They finally get to come home. They've played a gauntlet of a schedule, but all of the games have been away from home. They went to Wisconsin. They played in the Maui Invitational, 3 big-time games, and then they went to North Carolina. They finally get a high-major, big-time matchup at home. I think they're going to be the more energized team in this one, I hate to say, and it's just such a tough play. I think Illinois puts up a fight. I think Illinois keeps themselves in the game defensively, but Tennessee's going to pressure them. It's a bad matchup for Illinois' lack of ball handlers and turnover issues. I think those are going to manifest themselves a little bit, and I think Tennessee is going to win more of an ugly game. I think I'll go with 66-59 Tennessee. So, similar range to you. I think this will be more of a low-scoring game, but it's just such a tough place. I can't go in there with any confidence. And maybe that changes. Maybe Tennessee continues to really struggle. Connect is not healthy. Illinois looks great against Florida Atlantic. Maybe I changed my mind by Saturday, but as of now, I think it's going to be a tough task for Illinois. But that was an hour loaded with content here on the Champagne on Ice podcast. That'll probably wrap things up for us. Make sure to go follow our Twitter account at Champagne on Ice. Or X account, but I will never call it that. Just like I'll never call never call the Rack Jersey Mike's Arena. Be sure to subscribe to Field of 68 Podcast Network YouTube channel here. Give us a rating, review on any podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Spotify, still a work in progress. That's like a Field of 68 wide issue that we're trying to fix here, that a lot of our team pods are not on Spotify for whatever reason. But still working on that. But appreciate everybody for listening. Any last thoughts, Mike, as we head into a huge week of Illini hoops?
Go Illini. I mean, this is the stretch we've been talking about the entire time we've been doing the podcast. Like this 3 or 4 game stretch early December, it should be really fun. I already got one win. Why not keep it going?
Yeah, man, this is it feels like, especially now that college football has like winded down and the regular season, this feels like, all right, it's college basketball time now. And it started to feel that way yesterday. It's really going to feel that way this week. But hope everybody has a great week. Enjoy some Illini hoops on Tuesday and Saturday. Hope we're talking about 2 wins next Sunday, but regardless of the outcome, we'll be back and break it all down next week. And that'll do it for us right here on the Champaign